Welcome to this animation that will illustrate how to carry out a transaction in a Bourstad stock market simulation. Here we see that we have login the application, and we have an account. It's an account on which no previous transaction have been carried out, so we have $200,000 in Canadian money. We see on the left of the screen the participants menu. First, we have the dashboard, which is the default display of the application. Normally, we would see here all our position and gain or losses made on these positions, but since no transaction were made, this table is empty. We also have other information like what has been achieved by the participant up to now. Other functionalities are management of the portfolio, where we can define the investor profile, give more information on the strategies that will be carried out, and also specify learning objectives and achievements. Lower on the menu, we see some resources, for example, documentation. Documentation are within specified folders, so we have information on securities, how it works, contest rule, educational content, knowledge test. Also some information that is provided by Autorité des Marchés Financiers. Here we'll look at one specific information in the category information on securities. This will be links to the information diffused by quote media on each security. In fact, we'll be planning to illustrate transaction by purchasing some shares of Canadian Tires. So maybe we could give a look to what quote media provide us on Canadian Tire. So here I just click on the link and I see all the information provided by quote media. Some of these information will be displayed when we'll be performing our transaction, but in a later animation we'll explain all the information that we can find on this website. But for the moment, we could give a look to earning estimates for Canadian Tire. And here we can see that some brokers and banks have issued the price forecast for Canadian Tires for the coming year. So we have a high target. As of now, as we produce this animation, Canadian Tire shares are exchanged for $163.56, and we have a forecast of a high target price of $195. The low target price is $173, and the mean target price is $181.20. So we will keep that information in mind, because when we perform the transaction, we are asked to provide some target price, some objectives for the transaction, and this information will come handy at this moment. So let's go back to the application menu and we'll select transaction. Well, here we have a screener that can help us, because in fact there are 400 securities available for transaction, so maybe the screener can help us to find a specific security. So I'll select consumer products and companies from Canada. So if I apply the screener, now I see that my list is of 59 securities, which I suppose I can find quite easily. Canadian Tire. I could have written the name Tire or Canadian in that field, and we would have see the security displayed. So now I see that Canadian Tire is the last transaction was done at $163.50. I have some information. I can see that currently the bid price, so what a potential buyer is offering, is $163.29. We also have the ask price. It's the price demanded by some people who has the security and is ready to sell it at $163.59. So when I buy, I have to specify the type, the transaction type. So I can issue a buy order at market price or a buy order valid at a limit price. But for this first transaction, I'll select a buy order at market price. So now I have to determine which quantity. So I'll go for 50 shares of Canadian Tires. After this transaction, I will have in my portfolio 50 shares. It's my first transaction, though there's no other Canadian Tire shares in the portfolio. The liquid balance, obviously the application is able to calculate the exact amount that will be left after the transaction, but Bourstad is also an activity where I have to show that I know where I stand when I want to perform a transaction. So with the little help of an Excel spreadsheet, I will just figure out exactly what I will have in my portfolio after. I start with $200,000 in Canadian money. The share price is $163.84. I want to buy 50 shares, so that would be $8,192, but I have to add $20 for brokerage fees, so the total cost will be $8,212. So after the transaction, I'll be left with $191,788. So we can go back to the application. So that's 191,788. I also have to specify what change that transaction will do to my portfolio. So my liquid asset obviously will decrease because I have to pay with my cash. And Canadian Tire belongs to the consumer product category, so that category will increase. The information that displayed when I selected Canadian Tire included the yield of Canadian Tire. The yield is what the dividend represents as a share of the value of the stock. So this is exactly 2.1%. So the dividend of Canadian Tire, which will be issued quarterly, 4 times during the year, will represent 2.1% for the whole year. I also have to indicate my targeted capital gain. So here we remember that we saw that the average target price for Canadian Tire is $181. The current price, the price which I will pay, obviously, buying the stock, is $163.84. The target price is 11% over the current price, which I have figured here on this spreadsheet. So this will help me to specify an objective for the transaction. So let's say that I'll aim at making 9%. I know that if the average price is reached, I could make 11%, but let's say that I'll be conservative and I'll specify 9% for targeted capital gain for the coming year, with also 2.1% as income with the dividend. So totally, I'm aiming at 11.1% as a return, global return on the transaction. Here I have the opportunity to review my transaction and submit it. So I see that's Canadian Tire. I'm buying at market price 50 shares. So that's exactly what I want to do, and I submit. I do a submit. So what would happen now? I can know that this has been done at 13:56 Eastern Time, US and Canada. Bourstad application receive quotes from quote media every minute. So on average, my transaction will be processed with a quote that will be 30 seconds away from the moment of my transaction. So every minute the application receive quotation by bid and ask, but we receive that information with a 15-minute delay. So we have to wait a few minutes to learn exactly at what price my transaction has been processed. For the moment, we could give a look to the transaction slip. Now the transaction slip gives me the opportunity to see everything that relates to my transactions. So currently the status is pending for the reason I just explained. And I can see my income objective, that's 2.1, my targeted capital gain, 9%. If I have more information, I may change that information. In fact, I have 48 hours after having submitted the transaction to modify these information and also to add some justification for the transaction. So I'll add a few justification for the transaction. I've prepared these justification here on a little file. So first transaction that I will submit is recent measures put forward at the federal and provincial levels by governments have increased the disposable income of Canadian families. We've seen such measures regularly for the past few months, and this increased the amount that these families, these households, have to go to stores like Canadian Tires. Something else that we could have noticed when we look at the information earlier on Quote Media, either on Quote Media website or within the Bourstad application, is that Canadian Tire reported strong Q3, so that's third quarter, result on November 9. At that moment, the company increased its dividend by 38%. That's quite amazing. So I'll first supply that first justification. So here, this is an economic justification. So okay. Now I can add another justification. That second justification is related to the business itself, to what is happening at Canadian Tire. And we've seen that strong financial results, 38% increase in the dividend. That's quite something. And now I can save this information. Okay. But now if I go to my portfolio, I'll see that I have $200,000 in my portfolio when I created the portfolio, and my Canadian Tire transaction is pending. So we'll stop momentarily this animation, and we'll come back transparently in a few moments to see what happens when the transaction has been processed. So we are now resuming this animation after a few minutes. If we go now to the dashboard, we'll see that we have one stock in our portfolio. This stock is Canadian Tire. We have 50 shares. We are losing $19.50, but in fact this is exactly the amount of the brokerage fees, which are $20, more or less the brokerage fees. So the stock now has a greater value than what we paid, and in fact we're more or less maintaining our position as of now. We can look at the portfolio functionality. There we see that we have a transaction, a buy, that has been processed. If we look at the slip, we can see that it has been processed. The transaction amount is $8,170. So we have this information in place. There's also in portfolio the position tab. The position just describes everything that we find in the portfolio. Here we have Canadian dollars and Canadian Tire A category A shares. So that more or less complete this animation. If you eventually need more information or more help, I can mention that on the upper right you'll find a menu with an help functionality. There you can explain exactly what you need as information or additional help, and when you click on the envoyer or send, we will receive at Bourstad your request and will promptly give you an answer. So I hope that you'll enjoy participating in the Bourstad stock market simulation.